Zeth-Kari stood before the great crystal panel in the Science Council chamber and felt his skin change color from calm blue to nervous green. The ancient Veltar officials looked down at him with their large black eyes that had seen 1,000 species rise and fall across the galaxy. Elder Morthak spoke first, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. "You have been chosen for a special task, young observer," the elder said while touching the control surface. "A new species has entered the galactic stage, and they are already at war." Zeth-Kari shifted his weight from one foot to the other and tried to keep his breathing steady. He had studied many species before, but never during active warfare. The hologram in the center of the room showed a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. Strange creatures moved across the surface on 2 legs and built tall structures that reached toward the sky. "These are called humans," Elder Morthak continued. "They have just learned to travel between stars, and now they face the Krex Empire in battle. We need to understand how they fight and how they think when they are under pressure." The Krex Empire was known across the galaxy as a brutal force that crushed new civilizations without mercy. Zeth-Kari had read reports about their bioweapons and their hunger for conquest. Most young species lasted only a few months against them before surrendering or being destroyed completely. "The humans will likely be defeated within days," another elder said with confidence. "But we must document their behavior patterns before they become extinct. This data will help us understand how primitive species react to overwhelming force." Zeth-Kari nodded and felt his skin return to its normal blue color. This would be a simple assignment after all. He would observe the humans as they fought their final battles and then return home with useful scientific data. The Council provided him with advanced stealth technology that would make him invisible to both human and Krex sensors. 2 days later, Zeth-Kari found himself aboard a human warship called the UES Dakota. The vessel was crude compared to Veltar technology, but it moved through space with surprising speed. The humans had not detected his presence, and he was free to observe them as they prepared for battle. Admiral Karen Mitchell commanded the ship, and she moved through the corridors with quick steps and sharp eyes. Her hair was short and gray, and her uniform was covered with colorful marks that seemed to indicate rank or achievement. She spoke to her crew in short sentences, and they responded with immediate action. Captain Ryan Parker served as her second-in-command, and he studied star charts on a glowing screen. His face showed lines of worry, but his voice remained calm when he gave orders to the bridge crew. Dr. Lisa Harrison worked in the medical bay and prepared supplies for wounded soldiers who had not yet been hurt. Zeth-Kari was surprised by how relaxed the humans seemed, despite facing certain death. Sergeant Alex Turner laughed with his friends, while cleaning weapons that looked primitive but functional. Lieutenant Maria Santos sang strange songs while checking the ship's engine systems. The observer had expected to find panic and despair, but instead he saw determination and even joy. That human technology fascinated Zeth-Kari, even though it was thousands of years behind Veltar science. They used explosive projectiles instead of energy weapons, and their computers were slow and bulky. Their ships had no shields and relied on thick metal armor for protection. Yet somehow they had managed to build a fleet large enough to challenge the Krex Empire. Commander Jake Coleman gathered his pilots in a large room and showed them pictures of enemy ships on a wall screen. The Krex vessels looked like living things with curved surfaces and organic weapons. The human fighters were small and angular with sharp edges and visible engines that burned bright blue flames. "We know they are stronger than us," Coleman told his pilots. "We know they have better weapons and more ships, but we also know something they do not know about us yet." The pilots leaned forward to hear his words, and Zeth-Kari moved closer while staying invisible. What could these primitive humans possibly know that would help them against the mighty Krex Empire? "We know how to die fighting," Coleman said with a smile that showed his white teeth. "And we know how to make our deaths cost them everything they have." The pilots cheered and pounded their fists on the metal tables. Zeth Kari felt his skin turn yellow with confusion. These humans were talking about death as if it was a weapon they could use against their enemies. This behavior made no sense according to any military theory he had studied. Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez showed other humans how to repair damage during combat. His hands moved quickly over the ship's systems, and he explained how to keep fighting even when parts of the vessel were destroyed. Pilot Susan Clark practiced flying maneuvers that seemed designed to ram enemy ships rather than avoid them. Medic Tony Williams organized medical supplies and trained soldiers to treat wounds under fire. He taught them to keep fighting even when they were hurt and bleeding. Every human on the ship seemed to be preparing for a battle they expected to lose, but refused to surrender. Zeth Kari recorded everything he observed and sent regular reports back to the Science Council. He described the human weapons and tactics and their strange attitude toward death and defeat. The elders would find this data useful when studying other primitive species in the future. As the Dakota moved toward its first battle with the Kreks, Empire Zeth Kari felt confident that his mission would be completed soon. The humans would fight bravely for a few hours, and then they would be destroyed. He would document their final moments and return home with valuable scientific information. But something in the back of his mind made him uncomfortable. The way the humans smiled when they talked about dying troubled him in ways he could not explain. Their laughter in the face of certain doom seemed wrong somehow. Zeth Kari pushed these thoughts away and focused on his scientific duty. Soon this would all be over, and he could return to the safety of Veltar space. The first battle began at dawn near Kepler Station, and Zeth Kari watched from the bridge of the Dakota as human and Kreks fleets moved toward each other across the darkness of space. The Kreks ships outnumbered the humans 3-1, and their bioweapons glowed with deadly green light. Admiral Mitchell stood calmly at the center of the bridge while her crew prepared for what should have been their final fight. All ships maintain formation. Mitchell spoke into her communication device. Remember what we practiced and make every shot count. The Kreks opened fire first, and their energy beams cut through space like living lightning. The human ships scattered in all directions, but several were hit immediately and burst into flames. Zeth Kari expected the humans to retreat or surrender, but instead they charged forward with weapons blazing. Commander Jake Coleman led the fighter squadrons in a desperate attack against the largest Kreks vessel. His small ships moved like angry insects around the massive bioship while firing their primitive missiles. The Kreks returned fire with streams of acid that melted through metal armor, but the human pilots kept coming. Phoenix Squadron follow. Me in. Coleman's voice crackled over the radio. We are going to hurt them where it counts. Zeth Kari watched in amazement as Coleman flew his fighter directly into the mouth of a Kreks weapon and fired all his missiles at once. The explosion tore a huge hole in the enemy ship, but also destroyed Coleman's fighter completely. The other human pilots cheered and followed their dead commander's example by making similar suicide attacks. Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez worked frantically in the engine room of the Dakota while enemy fire shook the ship around him. Pipes burst and electrical systems sparked, but Rodriguez kept the engines running with repairs that should have been impossible. He used spare parts and broken equipment to create new systems that worked better than the original designs. Give me more power to the forward guns, Captain Ryan Parker shouted over the noise of battle. We need to break through their line. Rodriguez somehow found the extra power Parker needed, and the Dakota's weapons fired with twice their normal strength. The enhanced firepower punched through Kreks armor and damaged several enemy ships. Zeth Kari made notes about human engineering abilities, but struggled to understand how they made broken things work better than new ones. Pilot Susan Clark received orders to escort civilian transports away from the battle zone, but she ignored the command and turned her fighter toward the enemy instead. Her ship was loaded with supplies for the evacuation, but she used those same supplies as improvised weapons against Kreks fighters. Negative on the escort mission, Clark reported calmly. I am engaging enemy interceptors to buy time for the transports, Clark's Fighter was destroyed within minutes, but her sacrifice allowed 3 transport ships filled with families to escape to safety. Zethkari observed that the human woman had chosen certain death to save people she had never met. This behavior violated every survival instinct he knew about. Medic Tony Williams refused direct orders to evacuate the medical bay when the Dakota took heavy damage. Wounded soldiers lay on tables around him, while enemy fire came closer to his position. Instead of leaving, he continued treating patients and organizing other medics to help him. "I did not become a medic to run away from wounded people," Williams told his assistant while bandaging a soldier's burned arm. "These men and women fought for us, and now we fight for them." Williams and his team worked under impossible conditions while the ship shook and burned around them. They saved lives that should have been lost and refused to give up even when the medical bay filled with smoke. Zethkari recorded their behavior, but found it difficult to understand why they chose duty over survival. The battle raged for 6 hours instead of the 30 minutes Zethkari had predicted. The humans lost more than half their ships, but they kept fighting with whatever weapons they had left. When their missiles ran out, they used their ships as battering rams. When their energy weapons failed, they fired metal slugs from emergency guns. Captain Parker coordinated the Dakota's final attack run against a Krex command ship. The human vessel was badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, but Parker pushed forward anyway. His crew worked at their stations even though several of them were wounded and bleeding. "All hands prepare for ramming speed," Parker announced over the ship's speakers. "We are going to take that big one down with us." The Dakota accelerated toward the Krex command ship like a spear thrown by an angry giant. Enemy fire tore through the human vessel, but could not stop its momentum. At the last second, the Krex captain tried to turn away, but the collision was inevitable. Both ships exploded in a ball of white fire that lit up the entire battlefield. The destruction of the Krex command ship caused confusion among the remaining. Enemy vessels and several human ships escaped during the chaos. Zethkari barely managed to transfer to an escape pod before the Dakota was completely destroyed. Engineer Amy Peterson led a team of technicians in modifying escape pods to carry more people than they were designed for. Her modifications were crude but effective and saved dozens of lives during the evacuation. She refused a seat in the last pod and stayed behind to help others escape. Technician Mike Davis worked with Peterson to strip useful equipment from the dying ship. They salvaged weapons and communication gear that would help the survivors continue fighting. Davis was killed when a bulkhead collapsed, but his work allowed other humans to stay in contact with their fleet. Dr. Rachel Green treated wounded soldiers in an escape pod while it drifted toward a human rescue ship. She had no proper medical equipment but used pieces of the pod itself to create surgical tools. Her patients should have died, but Green's improvised treatments kept them alive. Navy Captain Steve Miller commanded one of the few human ships that survived the battle. His vessel was heavily damaged but still functional, and he used it to rescue survivors from destroyed ships. Miller's crew worked for 12 hours straight to save everyone they could find floating in space. Lieutenant Commander Julia Adams coordinated the retreat of surviving human forces. She made difficult decisions about which ships to save and which had to be abandoned. Adams chose to sacrifice damaged vessels so that healthy ships could escape with more survivors. When the battle finally ended, the humans had lost 2/3 of their fleet, but they had also destroyed or damaged half the Krex force. Zethkari found himself aboard a human rescue ship surrounded by wounded but determined survivors. They did not act like a defeated people. "We hurt them today," Admiral Mitchell said to her remaining officers. "They expected us to break and run, but instead we made them pay for every meter of space." The human survivors began planning their next attack before their wounds had even healed. They studied the wreckage of Krex ships and learned from everything they observed. Zethkari realized that these humans treated defeat like a learning experience rather than a reason to surrender. "They have better technology than us, Captain," Parker said while reviewing battle recordings. "But they fight like machines following a program." We fight like people who have something to protect. Zeth Kari sent his battle report to the Science Council and tried to explain what he had witnessed. The humans had lost the fight, but had damaged the enemy far more than should have been possible. Their willingness to die for each other created tactical advantages that no computer could calculate. The observer began to suspect that his mission might take longer than expected. These humans did not behave like any species he had studied before. They seemed to become more dangerous when they were losing rather than weaker. Zeth Kari wondered what they would do next. 3 months after Kepler's station, the war had spread across 12 star systems, and Zeth Kari found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans had not collapsed as predicted, but instead had grown stronger and more dangerous with each defeat. He now traveled with a different human fleet aboard the UES Montana and watched as they prepared for the siege of New Geneva. Colonel Danny Foster stood before a holographic display showing the mining colony that had become a fortress. The Krex had occupied New Geneva for 6 weeks and turned its industrial facilities into weapon factories. Foster studied the enemy positions with cold eyes that showed no emotion. "They think they are safe behind those defensive shields," Foster told his officers. "They think we will try to break through the front door like civilized soldiers." Foster's plan involved using the planet's own mining equipment against the Krex occupiers. Massive drilling machines would tunnel beneath the enemy positions while human engineers rerouted the colony's power grid to overload in specific locations. The attack would turn New Geneva's infrastructure into a weapon. Engineer Amy Peterson had survived the battle at Kepler Station and now led a team of technical specialists who worked with captured Krex technology. She had learned to modify alien bioweapons by combining them with human engineering principles. The results were devices that horrified even Zeth Kari. "The Krex use living metal in their armor," Peterson explained to her team while working on a writhing piece of enemy equipment. "But living things can be poisoned if you know how to do it right." Peterson's modifications created weapons that could eat through Krex armor from the inside out. The biometal would turn against its owners and consume them slowly while they were still alive. Zeth Kari recorded these developments but felt his skin turn gray with distress at what he was witnessing. Technician Mike Davis had been replaced by someone named Carl Wilson, who worked even more frantically than his predecessor. Wilson found ways to merge human and Krex technologies that should have been impossible. He created hybrid devices that were part machine and part living organism. "The key is not to fight their technology," Wilson said while grafting human electronics onto a Krex weapon. "The key is to make their technology fight itself." Dr. Rachel Green had established field hospitals that also served as research laboratories for studying Krex biology. She developed medical treatments that could enhance human soldiers in ways that blurred the line between healing and modification. Her patients became stronger and faster, but also more aggressive and less concerned with their own safety. "Pain is just information," Green told her medical staff while injecting a wounded soldier with experimental compounds. "We can teach the human body to use that information more effectively." Green's treatments allowed soldiers to fight with broken bones and severe injuries. They felt no fear and showed no mercy toward their enemies. Zeth Kari watched human Marines tear through Krex positions with their bare hands after receiving Green's modifications. Navy Captain Steve Miller commanded orbital bombardment operations that targeted civilian areas occupied by Krex forces. The humans had learned that the enemy used captured civilians as shields and decided that acceptable losses were better than allowing the enemy to exploit human compassion. "Every target has been verified as hostile," Miller announced to his gun crews. "Civilian casualties are unfortunate, but enemy casualties are required." Miller's bombardments destroyed entire city blocks to eliminate small groups of Krex soldiers. The humans calculated that saving their own people was worth sacrificing others who were already doomed. Zeth Kari struggled to understand how they made such decisions without showing any visible emotion. Lieutenant Commander Julia Adams specialized in interrogating captured Krex prisoners using techniques that combined human psychology with alien biology. She had learned to manipulate the enemy's hive mind communication system to extract information and spread misinformation back to Krex. Command structures. They think as one mind, which makes them predictable, Adams explained while working with a captured Krex warrior. But it also means that one corrupted thought can spread through their entire network. Adams inserted false memories and contradictory orders into Krex communication channels. Enemy units began attacking each other and following commands that led them into human traps. The Krex advantage in coordination became a weakness that humans exploited ruthlessly. Marine Captain Chris Anderson led ground assault teams that had adapted Krex biological weapons for close combat use. His soldiers carried living weapons that bonded with their nervous systems and enhanced their combat abilities. The weapons fed on human adrenaline and grew stronger during battle. "We are not the same species we were 6 months ago," Anderson told his Marines while they prepared for the assault on New Geneva. "We have become something that can hunt the hunters." Anderson's Marines moved through enemy positions like predatory animals. Their bioweapons allowed them to tear through Krex armor and regenerate from wounds that should have been fatal. They fought with a savagery that disturbed even their human commanders. Astronaut Helen Baker coordinated space-based assault platforms that fired modified asteroids at planetary targets. The rocks had been hollowed out and filled with human-designed viruses that could infect Krex biotechnology. Entire enemy installations would shut down as their living systems died from engineered diseases. "We learned their weakness when we learned to use their own tools," Baker reported while targeting another asteroid strike. "Everything alive can be killed if you understand how it lives." Baker's attacks turned the Krex advantage in biotechnology into a liability. Their living ships and organic weapons became vulnerable to human-designed plagues that spread through enemy fleets like wildfire. The humans had become biological warfare specialists in a matter of months. Nurse Patricia Lee worked in field hospitals that now resembled mad scientist laboratories more than medical facilities. She helped Dr. Green perform experimental procedures on volunteers who wanted to become more effective at killing enemies. The line between medical treatment and military enhancement had disappeared completely. "We save lives by making our soldiers harder to kill," Lee explained while preparing a volunteer for neural modification surgery. "Every enhanced soldier saves 10 normal ones." Lee's patients emerged from surgery with improved reflexes and reduced emotional responses to violence. They could perform complex tactical maneuvers while under fire and felt no hesitation about killing enemy combatants. Zeth Kari observed that they were becoming something other than baseline human. Communications Officer Larry Brown maintained contact with resistance cells operating behind enemy lines. These human survivors had learned to mimic Krex behavior and infiltrate enemy installations. They used captured biosuits to disguise themselves and moved freely through occupied territory. "The enemy thinks we are broken," Brown reported while coordinating resistance activities. "They do not understand that humans are most dangerous when they appear to be defeated." Brown's resistance fighters sabotaged Krex supply lines and assassinated enemy commanders using techniques they had learned from studying alien biology. They could survive in hostile environments for months and strike without warning before disappearing back into the civilian population. Sergeant First Class Kevin Wright developed new tactical doctrines based on studying failed Krex attacks. He identified patterns in enemy behavior and created countermeasures that turned their strengths into weaknesses. Wright's innovations spread throughout the human fleet and improved their combat effectiveness dramatically. "Every time they beat us, we learn something new," Wright told his tactical analysis team. "Every time we lose a battle, we win the next one faster." Wright's team studied enemy tactics obsessively and adapted human strategies in real time. They could predict Krex battle plans and prepare counters before the enemy even began their attacks. The humans were learning faster than their enemies could adapt. Intelligence Officer Samantha Bell coordinated espionage operations that relied on captured Krex technology and modified human agents. Her spies could infiltrate enemy installations by disguising themselves as Krex bioforms. They gathered intelligence and spread chaos through enemy command structures. "We have become better at being Krex than the Krex are," Bell reported while reviewing intelligence gathered by her modified agents. "They cannot tell the difference between us and them anymore." Bell's agents could mimic Krex biology so perfectly that they fooled even advanced enemy sensors. They operated behind enemy lines for months and caused massive damage to Krex logistics and communication networks. The humans had learned to wear their enemies' faces. The siege of New Geneva lasted only 3 days because the humans had become something the Krex could not understand or counter. They fought with weapons that should not exist and tactics that violated every military principle. Szeth Kari watched them claim victory through methods that disturbed him more than their previous defeats had. When the battle ended, the humans had not just won but had absorbed and improved upon every piece of Krex technology they encountered. They were no longer the primitive species he had been sent to observe. They had become something that scared him in ways he could not name or explain to his superiors. 6 months into the war, Szeth Kari found himself aboard the UES Phoenix watching the brutal campaign for the Titan shipyards and struggling to maintain his scientific objectivity. The humans had evolved beyond anything in his database, and their behavior defied every model of warfare psychology he had studied. They could switch between acts of stunning compassion and calculated brutality within moments, and somehow both responses seemed equally natural to them. Marine Captain Chris Anderson led the assault teams that stormed the orbital shipyards where Krex forces had been building their largest bioships. His enhanced soldiers moved through zero gravity like predators born in space, and their bioweapons had adapted to feed on the cosmic radiation that would kill normal humans. Anderson himself had undergone so many modifications that Szeth Kari could barely recognize him as the same species he had observed months earlier. "Remember what we learned about their breeding chambers," Anderson told his Marines as they prepared to board enemy vessels. "Destroy the young ones first, because they grow fast and learn faster." The Marines that followed Anderson into battle showed no hesitation about killing Krex offspring, even though the young creatures posed no immediate threat. They had learned that mercy toward enemy children meant fighting adult versions of those same creatures later. Szeth Kari recorded their efficiency, but felt disturbed by how easily they made such decisions. Astronaut Helen Baker coordinated the space-based portion of the assault using modified human ships that incorporated living Krex technology. Her vessels could heal damage during battle and adapt their weapon systems in real time. Baker had learned to think like the bioships she commanded, and her tactical decisions resembled organic growth more than military planning. "We do not fight the enemy anymore," Baker reported while directing her living fleet. "We become the enemy, and then we become something better than the enemy." Baker's ships moved through space like a school of predatory fish hunting larger prey. They coordinated their attacks through bio-neural networks that connected human crews with alien technology. The pilots no longer distinguished between themselves and their vessels and fought with an intuition that transcended normal human capabilities. During a lull in the fighting, Szeth Kari observed Nurse Patricia Lee treating wounded Krex prisoners in the medical bay of the Phoenix. She worked just as hard to save enemy lives as she did to save human ones, and showed genuine concern for their suffering. Her compassion seemed completely sincere, despite the fact that she had been modifying humans into enhanced killers for months. "Pain is pain, regardless of what species feels it," Lee explained while bandaging a wounded Krex warrior. "These prisoners are no longer combatants, so they deserve medical care." Lee's treatment of enemy wounded confused Szeth Kari because the same humans who showed mercy to helpless prisoners had earlier executed captured Krex commanders without trial. They seemed to operate according to rules that changed based on circumstances he could not predict or understand. The same pattern repeated throughout the ship as Zethkari observed humans switching between compassion and brutality with disturbing ease. Communications Officer Larry Brown risked his life to maintain contact with trapped civilians in enemy-occupied areas, while simultaneously coordinating artillery strikes that would kill thousands of those same civilians, along with their creks. Captors. "We save who we can and we kill who we must," Brown said while directing rescue operations and bombardment missions at the same time. The math is simple even when the choices are hard. Brown could calculate acceptable casualty ratios while listening to desperate pleas for help from people he was about to sacrifice. He showed genuine emotion about the losses, but never allowed those feelings to interfere with his tactical decisions. Zethkari struggled to understand how humans compartmentalize their responses so effectively. Intelligence Officer Samantha Bell had perfected techniques for extracting information from Krex prisoners that combined torture with medical treatment. She could cause tremendous pain while simultaneously healing the damage to keep her subjects alive and responsive. Her methods were brutally effective, but also designed to minimize permanent harm. "Information saves lives on both sides," Bell explained, while working with a captured Krex intelligence officer. "The faster we end this war, the fewer people die overall." Bell justified her interrogation methods by pointing to their strategic value, but Zethkari observed that she took no pleasure in causing pain. She approached torture with the same clinical detachment that Dr. Green used for medical procedures. The humans had weaponized their capacity for empathy as well as their ability to inflict suffering. Sergeant First Class Kevin Wright demonstrated the human ability to learn and adapt by developing new tactical innovations daily. His latest creation involved using captured Krex biotechnology to enhance human intuition during combat. Soldiers equipped with his neural modifications could predict enemy movements before they happened. "We are becoming something that can think, like them but faster," Wright told his tactical development team while testing new enhancement protocols. "Soon we will know what they are going to do before they know it themselves." Wright's enhanced soldiers moved through battle with an almost supernatural awareness of enemy intentions. They could dodge attacks that had not been fired yet and counter strategies that were still being formulated. The humans were developing precognitive abilities through technology they had stolen from their enemies. Dr. Rachel Green had expanded her research beyond simple combat enhancement and begun exploring the fundamental nature of human consciousness. Her latest experiments involved merging human neural patterns with Krex hive mind communication systems to create hybrid intelligence networks that combined individual creativity with collective coordination. "We are not trying to become like them," Green explained while monitoring subjects connected to bio-neural interfaces. "We are trying to become something that includes what they are, but goes beyond it." Green's test subjects could share thoughts and emotions across vast distances while maintaining their individual personalities and decision-making abilities. They functioned as both independent agents and components of a larger intelligence that could process information faster than any existing system. General Paul Young commanded the overall assault on the Titan shipyards and made strategic decisions that balanced massive casualties against long-term objectives. His plans involved sacrificing entire battle groups to achieve tactical advantages that would save more lives later. Young could order thousands of deaths while showing genuine grief for every loss. Command means choosing which tragedies to accept, Young told his staff officers while reviewing casualty projections. "We cannot save everyone, but we can make their sacrifices count for something meaningful." Young's strategies incorporated human lives as expendable resources while simultaneously treating each individual death as a personal failure. He carried the names and faces of everyone who died under his command but never allowed guilt to interfere with necessary decisions. Zethkari observed that human leaders could function despite psychological burdens that would paralyze other species. Captain Linda Martinez developed new engineering techniques that allowed human ships to regenerate from damage using Krek's biotechnology. Her innovations created vessels that could literally grow new components during battle and adapt their configurations to meet changing tactical requirements. The ships became living extensions of their crews. "We do not repair our ships anymore," Martinez explained while demonstrating her bioengineering systems. "We teach them to heal themselves and to learn from their injuries." Martinez's ships could survive damage that would destroy conventional vessels and emerge from battle stronger than before. They incorporated lessons learned from each engagement into their biological systems and passed those improvements on to other ships in the fleet. The humans had created a navy that evolved in real time. Engineer Bob Taylor specialized in converting civilian infrastructure into military assets, using techniques that combined human ingenuity with alien biotechnology. His teams could transform mining equipment into weapons and turn manufacturing facilities into military bases within hours. Every human installation became a potential fortress. "Everything can be a weapon if you understand how it works," Taylor said while converting a water treatment plant into a chemical weapons factory. "The enemy thinks in terms of military and civilian targets, but we think in terms of useful and useless resources." Taylor's innovations meant that human colonies could not be truly conquered because any civilian facility could become a military threat. The distinction between combatants and non-combatants had disappeared as every human became capable of contributing to the war effort through enhanced technology and modified biology. As the battle for the Titan shipyards reached its climax, Zeth Kari realized that he was no longer observing a war between two species, but watching the birth of something entirely new. The humans had not simply adapted to fight the Kreks, but had transcended the limitations that defined both species. They were becoming something that incorporated the best features of both civilizations while discarding the weaknesses that made each vulnerable. The final Kreks assault on Earth began 1 year after Zeth Kari had first observed human warfare, and he found himself struggling to maintain even the pretense of scientific objectivity. The humans had become something that defied classification, and their behavior during this ultimate battle revealed the true scope of their transformation. He watched from the bridge of the UES Defiance as Admiral Karen Mitchell coordinated a defense that should have been impossible against odds that should have been overwhelming. "All fleets maintain defensive positions around the homeworld," Mitchell commanded, while studying tactical displays that showed thousands of Krek's bioships approaching Earth like a plague of locusts. "Remember that we are not just fighting for victory anymore, but for the right to define what victory means." The Krek's armada was the largest force ever assembled in galactic history, and it carried bioweapons capable of sterilizing entire planets. Their strategy was simple and brutal total: destruction of human civilization followed by conversion of Earth into a breeding facility for their next generation of warriors. But the humans had spent a year preparing for this moment, and their preparations went far beyond conventional military defense. Fighter pilot Carl Johnson led the first wave of human interceptors against the advancing enemy fleet, but his squadrons were unlike anything Zeth Kari had seen before. The pilots had undergone neural modifications that connected them directly to their bio-enhanced ships, and they fought with a coordination that rivaled Krek's hive mind tactics while maintaining individual creativity and adaptability. Phoenix Wing. "Engaging enemy vanguard," Johnson reported while his fighter merged with its biomechanical systems. "We are not the same species they invaded a year ago." Johnson's pilots fought with ships that were part machine and part living organism. The vessels could adapt their configurations during combat and heal damage by consuming enemy biomatter. When Johnson's fighter was severely damaged, he deliberately rammed it into a Krek's command ship, and both pilot and vessel merged with the enemy technology to create a hybrid system that turned against its former masters. Dr. Nancy Johnson worked frantically to evacuate civilians from Earth's major population centers while her brother sacrificed himself in the battle above. Her evacuation procedures incorporated Krek's biotechnology, to create transport systems that could move millions of people faster than conventional methods allowed. She saved lives through techniques that would have been impossible without knowledge, stolen from the enemy. We learned their methods for moving large populations quickly, Nancy explained while coordinating refugee movements. The irony is that we are using their technology to save the people they came here to kill. Nancy's evacuation systems could teleport groups of civilians directly through space using bioneural networks that bypassed traditional transportation limitations. The refugees emerged at safe locations with no memory of the journey and no understanding of how they had escaped. Humanity had learned to perform miracles by combining alien science with desperate innovation. General Paul Young coordinated the ground defense of Earth using strategies that incorporated lessons learned from every previous battle in the war. His defensive positions were not fixed fortifications, but living ecosystems that could adapt and respond to changing tactical situations. The planet itself had become a weapon in human hands. Earth is not just our home anymore, Young told his commanders while reviewing defensive preparations. We have made it into something that can defend itself. Young's defensive systems included modified human cities that could reconfigure themselves into fortress complexes and natural landscapes that had been bioengineered to attack invading forces. Trees released toxins that specifically targeted Krek's biology, while mountains opened to reveal weapon emplacements that had grown like living things. The humans had transformed their homeworld into a living organism capable of warfare. Captain Linda Martinez commanded a fleet of hybrid vessels that incorporated the best features of both human and Krek's technology. Her ships looked like works of art, created by an insane genius, and they fought with capabilities that transcended the limitations of either parent technology. The vessels could think and feel and dream while destroying enemies with ruthless efficiency. We are no longer fighting with ships, Martinez reported while her living fleet engaged enemy biovessels. We are fighting with partners who happen to be made of metal and flesh instead of just flesh. Martinez's ships communicated with their crews through bioneural interfaces that created genuine emotional bonds between pilots and vessels. The ships fought to protect their human partners with the same fierce loyalty that humans showed toward each other. Both species had learned to love across the boundaries of biology and technology. Engineer Bob Taylor had spent months preparing Earth's infrastructure for conversion into military assets, and his preparations now revealed their full scope. Every civilian facility on the planet could transform into a weapons factory or defensive position within minutes. Hospitals became bioweapon laboratories while schools turned into tactical command centers. The enemy thinks they are invading a planet full of civilians, Taylor said while activating planetary defense systems. They do not understand that every human is now a potential soldier and every building is now a potential fortress. Taylor's modifications meant that Earth could continue fighting even if all conventional military forces were destroyed. The planet's infrastructure had become a distributed weapons system that could operate independently of centralized command. The humans had made their home world literally unkillable. Marine Captain Chris Anderson led ground forces that were no longer recognizably human in their physical capabilities, but remained completely human in their emotional responses. His soldiers could survive in vacuum and regenerate from wounds that would destroy normal people, but they still fought to protect their families and preserve their civilization. We have become monsters so that our children do not have to, Anderson told his enhanced Marines while they prepared for close combat with Krek's invasion forces. We chose to change ourselves rather than let them change us. Anderson's Marines fought with bioweapons that had been grown rather than manufactured, and their bodies incorporated alien technology that made them virtually indestructible. They could tear through Krek's armor with their bare hands and survive exposure to biotoxins that would kill unmodified humans instantly. Yet they retained their capacity for love and sacrifice and humor. Communications Officer Larry Brown maintained contact with human forces throughout the solar system while simultaneously coordinating with alien allies who had joined the fight against the Kreks. His communication networks incorporated bioneural technology that allowed instant coordination across vast distances without the delays that limited conventional military communications. "The galaxy is watching this battle," Brown reported while managing communications, "with a dozen different species. They want to see if we can do what no one else has ever done." Brown's networks connected human forces with Veltar observers and other species who had decided to support humanity against their common enemy. The humans had become the center of a galactic alliance that included former enemies and neutral parties, who recognized that human victory was necessary for galactic stability. Intelligence Officer Samantha Bell coordinated espionage operations that had infiltrated the highest levels of Krek's command structure. Her modified agents had learned to think like the enemy so completely that they could predict Krek's strategies before enemy commanders finalized their plans. The humans were fighting a war in which they knew their enemy's intentions before those enemies did. "We have become better at being Kreks than they are," Bell reported while her agents fed false information into enemy communication networks. "They can no longer trust their own thoughts because we have learned to think their thoughts better than they can." Bell's agents had created false memories and contradictory commands throughout the Krek's fleet, causing massive confusion and friendly fire incidents. Enemy units attacked each other while following orders that seemed legitimate but led to tactical disasters. The humans had weaponized the enemy's hive mind advantages and turned them into crippling weaknesses. Dr. Rachel Green supervised the final stages of human enhancement programs that created soldiers capable of fighting on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Her subjects could engage enemies in normal space while also battling in bioneural networks and digital environments. They had become multidimensional warriors who could not be defeated through conventional means. "We are not just fighting for survival anymore," Green explained while monitoring her enhanced subjects. "We are fighting to determine what kind of beings we will become." Green's enhanced humans could exist partially in biological form and partially as information patterns that moved through enemy systems like viruses. They could attack Krek's bioships from within their own neural networks while simultaneously fighting physical battles in normal space. The humans had transcended the limitations of single-dimensional existence. Sergeant First Class Kevin Wright had developed tactical innovations that allowed human forces to predict and counter every Krek strategy before it could be implemented. 3 months after the Krek's retreat from Earth, Zethkari found himself preparing his final report for the Veltar Science Council and struggling with the knowledge that he had documented something that would forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans had won their war, but the victory had cost them their innocence and transformed them into something that would terrify every other species once they understood what humanity had become. The observer sat in his quarters aboard the human research vessel UES Discovery and watched through his window as construction crews rebuilt the orbital facilities around Earth. The workers were a mixture of baseline humans and enhanced individuals who could survive in vacuum without protective suits. They moved through space like swimmers through water, and their biomechanical tools could reshape metal and stone through touch alone. Colonel Frank Lewis commanded the reconstruction efforts with the same efficiency he had shown during the war. But his enhanced nervous system now processed information faster than most computers. Lewis could coordinate thousands of work crews simultaneously while maintaining awareness of every detail in multiple construction projects. He had become a living supercomputer that retained human creativity and intuition. "We are not rebuilding what we lost," Lewis explained to Zethkari during one of their regular interviews. "We are building something better than what we had before. We learned what we were capable of becoming." Lewis's reconstruction projects incorporated biotechnology that would allow Earth's orbital facilities to grow and adapt over time. The new stations were alive in ways that conventional structures could never be, and they would continue evolving long after their original builders were gone. Humanity had learned to create legacy projects that would outlast individual lifespans. Captain Jennifer Davis had returned from military service to civilian life, but her enhanced reflexes and modified biology made it impossible for her to function normally in pre-war society. She joined other veterans in establishing new communities where enhanced humans could live without hiding their capabilities from baseline populations. "We cannot go back to being what we were before," Davis told Zeth Kari, while showing him through one of the enhanced communities. "We have seen too much and learned too much and changed too much to pretend we are still the same species." Davis's community included former soldiers who had been modified so extensively that they could barely be recognized as human, but who retained their capacity for love and friendship and hope. They had created a new kind of civilization that incorporated the best features of both human and alien cultures while discarding the limitations that had defined both. Chief Warrant Officer Gary Robinson worked with civilian engineers to develop technologies that would allow baseline humans to benefit from wartime innovations without undergoing dangerous enhancement procedures. His projects created tools and techniques that could improve human life without requiring biological modification. "Not everyone needs to become what we became during the war," Robinson explained while demonstrating civilian applications of military biotechnology. "But everyone should have the option to choose their own level of enhancement." Robinson's innovations meant that human civilization could continue evolving without forcing anyone to abandon their original biology. Enhanced and baseline humans could coexist and cooperate while pursuing different paths of development. The species had learned to embrace diversity as a source of strength rather than division. Captain Michelle Brown commanded exploration missions that used hybrid human Krex technology to investigate regions of space that had been considered unreachable. Before the war, her ships could travel faster than light through bioneural networks that connected multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. "We are not just exploring new star systems anymore," Brown reported during one of her deep space missions. "We are exploring new ways of existing and new definitions of what it means to be alive." Brown's expeditions discovered civilizations and phenomena that existed partially in normal space and partially in bio-neural dimensions that baseline humans could not perceive. Her crews served as ambassadors between reality levels and established diplomatic relations with beings that transcended conventional definitions of life and intelligence. Dr. Rachel Green continued her research into human enhancement, but focused on helping war veterans adapt to civilian life rather than creating new weapons. Her medical facilities provided treatment for both physical and psychological trauma, while helping enhanced individuals integrate their military modifications with peacetime activities. "The war changed us in ways that go beyond biology," Green explained while treating a veteran who suffered from nightmares about battles fought in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We must learn to heal not just bodies, but souls that have been stretched across realities we never knew existed." Green's patients included individuals who had experienced combat in bio-neural networks and digital environments, as well as physical space. They suffered from forms of trauma that had no precedent in medical literature and required treatment methods that combined alien psychology with human compassion. Engineer Bob Taylor had established research facilities that continued developing hybrid technologies for peaceful purposes, but his work retained military applications that made other species nervous. His innovations could be used for construction or destruction depending on the intentions of their operators. "Every tool can be a weapon, and every weapon can be a tool," Taylor said while demonstrating construction equipment that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. "The difference lies in how we choose to use what we have learned." Taylor's technologies gave humans capabilities that approached those of mythological gods, but he insisted on maintaining safeguards that prevented misuse of such power. His research teams included enhanced individuals who could perceive the long-term consequences of technological development across multiple probability streams. Intelligence Officer Samantha Bell worked with galactic authorities to establish new protocols for interspecies communication that incorporated lessons learned from infiltrating Krek's hive mind networks. Her methods allowed different species to share thoughts and emotions directly without losing their individual identities. "We learned to think like other beings during the war," Bell explained while facilitating negotiations between species that had been enemies for millennia. "Now we can use that ability to create understanding instead of confusion." Bell's communication protocols enabled diplomatic breakthroughs that resolved conflicts which had lasted for thousands of years. Species that had been unable to understand each other's motivations could now share perspectives directly and discover common ground that had been invisible through conventional diplomatic channels. Marine Captain Chris Anderson established training facilities where enhanced humans taught combat techniques to volunteers from other species who wanted to defend themselves against future threats. His programs created soldiers who could fight using hybrid tactics that combined the best features of multiple civilizations. "We do not want to be the only species capable of this kind of warfare," Anderson explained while training alien recruits in bioneural combat techniques. "The galaxy is safer when everyone can defend themselves effectively." Anderson's students included representatives from dozens of species who learned to enhance their natural abilities using technologies developed during the Human-Krek's War. They returned to their homeworlds carrying knowledge that would transform galactic military doctrine and defensive capabilities. Communications Officer Larry Brown coordinated the establishment of a galactic communication network that allowed instant contact between any inhabited systems. His bioneural networks created connections that transcended the limitations of space and time while maintaining security against hostile infiltration. "Distance no longer matters for those who understand how to think together," Brown said while demonstrating his communication systems. "We have created a galaxy where every voice can be heard and every thought can be shared." Brown's networks enabled cooperation between civilizations separated by thousands of light years and facilitated the rapid exchange of scientific and cultural information. Species that had developed in isolation could now participate in galactic civilization without losing their unique perspectives and traditions. Astronaut Helen Baker led expeditions that established human colonies in regions of space where conventional life could not survive. Her settlements used biotechnology to create artificial ecosystems that could support both enhanced and baseline human populations in environments that defied normal biological requirements. "We are no longer limited by the kind of worlds we can inhabit," Baker reported while establishing a colony inside a gas giant's atmosphere. "We can create homes anywhere we choose to go." Baker's colonies served as research stations and diplomatic outposts that demonstrated human adaptability to representatives from other species. They proved that humanity could survive and thrive in any environment while maintaining their cultural identity and emotional connections to their origins. As Zethkari compiled his observations into a final report, he realized that his mission had been fundamentally compromised from the beginning.